Imagine a book, an ancient guide that holds the secrets to a life of wisdom, prosperity, and spiritual fulfillment. A text so old, yet so relevant, that its words echo through the centuries, impacting the lives of millions. We're talking about the Book of Proverbs, a collection of teachings attributed to King Solomon, who, according to biblical tradition, was the wisest man who ever lived. At the heart of Proverbs lies an intriguing concept, the idea that its verses contain secret codes, hidden messages that don't reveal themselves easily to the casual reader. But what are these codes, and why are they so important? To grasp the depth of these teachings, more than a superficial reading is needed. It requires meditation, reflection, and the application of each principle in our daily lives. In this first chapter, we begin a journey of discovery. Together, we'll explore the mysteries hidden in Solomon's words, starting with the introduction to wisdom, the central theme that permeates the entire book. Wisdom here is not merely knowledge or intelligence, but a deep understanding of life, a spiritual discernment that guides us beyond appearances and connects us to the divine. Solomon begins Proverbs with a powerful declaration. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for learning wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight. From the outset, he warns us that this is not just any book. Each verse is carefully crafted to convey timeless truths. Every word is chosen to teach, correct, and transform. But what makes this book so special? It's its universal applicability. No matter your religion, culture, or era, Proverbs has something to offer. They challenge us to live more consciously, to cultivate virtues like prudence, justice, and righteousness, and to avoid the mistakes that lead to ruin and disillusionment. It's a text that transcends time and speaks directly to us, if we're willing to listen. Wisdom, in this context, is seen as a divine gift, something we must actively seek. It's not just about accumulating knowledge, but applying it in ways that enrich our lives and the lives of those around us. Solomon, with all his wealth and power, recognized that true prosperity comes from living in harmony with the principles of wisdom. And it's this wisdom that he wants to share with us through these proverbs. As we prepare to dive into the first chapter, it's worth reflecting on the purpose behind these words. Solomon wasn't just writing for his generation, but for all future ones. He knew that the challenges of life, the temptations, and the pitfalls we face remain the same, even as external circumstances change. And so, he offers us a map, a series of guidelines that, if followed, lead to a full and meaningful life. The first chapter is the introduction to this journey. In it, we're called to open our hearts and minds to wisdom, to recognize its importance, and to deeply desire to possess it. This is not a passive quest, but an active effort to understand and internalize these truths. With this, we enter the first layer of this vast spiritual treasure. Prepare to discover how wisdom cries out in the streets, how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and how Solomon's counsel can shape our lives in ways we might never have imagined. This is just the beginning of a journey that promises not just knowledge, but transformation. Imagine walking down a busy street, surrounded by the constant sound of voices and activity, where distractions are numerous and attention is a scarce commodity. Amid this cacophony, there's a voice that rises above all others, a voice that cries out incessantly, trying to reach those who are willing to listen. This is the powerful image that the Book of Proverbs presents in the first chapter. Wisdom, personified, shouting in the streets, in the squares, and at the city gates. Wisdom here is not silent or reserved. It's active, dynamic, and above all, accessible. Solomon describes wisdom as something within everyone's reach, yet not everyone pays attention. It's not hidden in ancient books or reserved for scholars. On the contrary, it's available to anyone who has the courage to hear and follow it. But why then do so few respond to its call? The text shows us that wisdom cries out to the simple, to mockers, and to fools, inviting them to abandon their ways and follow the path of understanding. It's an open invitation, but also a warning. Those who despise wisdom and ignore its call are destined to face the consequences of their choices. Wisdom, therefore, is not just a generous offer, it's also a serious responsibility. In the rush of the modern world, where information and opinions are in constant flux, the voice of wisdom often gets lost. We're bombarded by messages promising quick success, instant pleasure, and easy solutions, but that rarely lead to true peace and fulfillment. Yet wisdom continues to cry out, persistent and patient, waiting for someone to turn to it. Solomon uses this metaphor to remind us that wisdom is always present, but it's up to us to decide whether we will heed it. Wisdom in the streets symbolizes the truth that is accessible to all, regardless of origin or status. It doesn't show partiality. Its invitation is universal. And yet, it doesn't force anyone to follow its ways. The choice, ultimately, is ours. The appeal of wisdom also warns us about the consequences of ignoring it. As the chapter progresses, we see that those who refuse to listen to it face a future of calamity and destruction. This is not just a matter of divine punishment, but a natural consequence of foolish choices. When we reject wisdom, we stray from the path that leads to life and place ourselves on a path of self-destruction. This metaphor also challenges us to reflect on our own lives. Are we truly listening to the voice of wisdom, or are we being led by the louder, more seductive voices that surround us? Wisdom cries out in the streets of our minds, inviting us to a life of depth, purpose, and integrity. But to hear it, we must be willing to silence the distractions and open our hearts to its guidance. So as we reflect on this image of wisdom crying out in the streets, we're called to make a choice. Will we continue to ignore this voice, as many do, or will we heed its call, allowing it to guide us in every aspect of our lives? This is a decision that will define not just our present, but also our future. As we move forward into the next verses of this chapter, we'll continue to explore how wisdom presents itself, how it warns us, and how it calls us to a life that goes beyond the superficial. This is just the beginning of a deep journey, where each step brings us closer to true understanding, and consequently, true peace. At the center of the wisdom described in the Book of Proverbs lies a principle that serves as the foundation for everything else. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. This seemingly simple phrase carries one of the most profound and transformative concepts, not only in Judeo-Christian spirituality, but also in life philosophy as a whole. What does it mean to fear the Lord? On a superficial reading, the word fear might evoke feelings of dread or terror, but in the biblical context, it has a much richer and more complex meaning. The fear of the Lord is not about paralyzing fear, but a deep respect, reverence, and awe for God. It's recognizing the greatness and holiness of the Creator, understanding our own smallness and dependence on Him. This type of fear is the starting point for true knowledge because it establishes the moral and spiritual foundation on which everything else must be built. Without this fundamental reverence, any attempt to accumulate knowledge or wisdom is doomed to be shallow and ultimately futile. It's like building a house on sand. It may appear solid for a while, but eventually, without a firm foundation, it will not withstand life's storms. For Solomon, understanding the fear of the Lord is understanding the very nature of reality. It's recognizing that there is a moral and spiritual order in the universe that transcends our limited human comprehension. It's through this recognition that we open ourselves to true wisdom, which is not just intellectual knowledge, but a deep and practical understanding of how to live in a way that honors this order. On the other hand, those who despise wisdom and instruction, the fools, as Solomon calls them, reject this foundation. They choose to follow their own paths, relying on their limited understanding. This leads to a cycle of foolishness and error, where the lack of reverence for God results in a lack of discernment in all other areas of life. This principle also reminds us of the importance of humility. Fearing the Lord is, in many ways, acknowledging our own limitations and our need for divine guidance. It's understanding that no matter how much we learn and grow, there will always be a wisdom greater than ours, a truth deeper than we can reach on our own. This kind of humility is what allows us to learn and grow genuinely, rather than becoming arrogant or complacent. But how do we apply this principle in our daily lives? The fear of the Lord can manifest in various ways: in practicing gratitude, in respecting others, in integrity in our actions and decisions, and in the continuous pursuit of living according to divine principles. When we do this, we begin to see wisdom not just as something we acquire, but as something that becomes part of who we are. This fundamental principle of fearing the Lord as the beginning of knowledge also challenges us to reevaluate our priorities. In a world that often values material success above all, this verse reminds us that true wisdom begins with spirituality and character. It's a call to put God and spiritual values at the center of our lives, knowing that by doing so, everything else will fall into its proper place. As we continue to explore the first chapter of Proverbs, we'll see how this concept of fearing the Lord intertwines with other themes, shaping our understanding of what it means to live a wise and just life. This is the foundation upon which we will build the rest of our journey through this extraordinary book. Continuing the first chapter of Proverbs, we are introduced to one of the most powerful and familiar images to many of us: the voice of parents. Solomon emphasizes the importance of listening to and following the advice of father and mother, highlighting the invaluable worth of wisdom passed down from previous generations. He writes, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the teaching of your mother, for they are a garland of grace to your head and chains for your neck." This passage invites us to reflect on the fundamental role that parents play in shaping the character and morality of their children. More than just caring for physical needs, parents are seen as the first teachers, those who introduce their children to the path of wisdom and justice. The teaching they impart is not just knowledge, but a moral compass that guides the children throughout their lives. Solomon compares this parental wisdom to a garland of grace and chains of honor, suggesting that following these teachings not only adorns one's life with beauty and dignity, but also protects from many pitfalls and hardships. Here, the value of obedience and respect for parents is elevated to a spiritual principle, something that transcends the simple act of following rules and becomes a path to true prosperity. However, this parental instruction also carries a caution. The wisdom of parents should be heard and respected, but that doesn't mean it should be followed blindly. Part of maturing is learning to discern when to follow parents' advice and when to forge one's own path, especially in situations where circumstances may have changed since the advice was originally given. Wisdom, therefore, involves both learning and critically applying these teachings. Moreover, the advice of parents also reflects the tradition and culture in which they were raised. They are bearers of the lessons accumulated over generations, representing the voice of experience. However, it's important to remember that not all traditions are beyond question. Solomon invites us to honor and value the wisdom of our ancestors, but also to cultivate our capacity for judgment and discernment. This balance between respect for parents and personal autonomy is essential for the development of true wisdom. By listening to and internalizing the advice of our parents, we are invited to reflect on our own lives and make decisions that align with our values and personal beliefs. This is the process by which wisdom is transferred and transformed, adapting to the needs and challenges of each new generation. It's also worth considering how this instruction applies in a modern context. In today's world, where families can be diverse and complex, the role of parents can be played by various figures: teachers, mentors, community leaders, and other role models. Wisdom, therefore, is not limited to the biological relationship between parents and children, but can be found in any relationship where advice, example, and teaching are transmitted. Solomon reminds us that these pieces of advice are not mere words, but living guides that help us navigate the often turbulent waters of life. The garland of grace and the chains of honor symbolize the reward of following a path of wisdom, where respect for others' teachings combines with the ability to think for oneself. This is the balance that allows us to grow, both spiritually and morally. As we continue our journey through Proverbs, we will see how these teachings from parents intertwine with the other lessons of the book, creating a tapestry of wisdom that is both personal and universal. The voice of parents, like the voice of wisdom that cries out in the streets, is a call to reflection and action, an opportunity to learn from the past to shape a wiser and more just future. As we delve further into the first chapter of Proverbs, Solomon presents us with a clear and urgent warning about the dangers of bad company and negative influences. He writes, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause, let us swallow them alive like Sheol, whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us. We will all have one purse." He warns us not to give in to these temptations. This passage leads us to reflect on the reality of external pressures we face daily. From a young age, we are confronted with choices that can lead us astray from the path of righteousness. The voices of sinners, who here symbolize those who seek personal gain at the cost of injustice, are often seductive and persuasive. They promise wealth, power, and pleasure, but hide the devastating consequences that such choices can bring. The seduction of sinners is a recurring theme in biblical wisdom, where sin is often personified as something attractive, but inevitably leading to destruction. Solomon describes this seduction as an ambush, a path that seems promising on the surface, but is full of hidden dangers. Those who fall into this trap are compared to those who go down to the pit, a vivid image of spiritual and moral death. But what makes this seduction so powerful? Partly, it's the human desire for acceptance and belonging. The promise of being part of a group, of sharing wealth and power, can be incredibly attractive, especially to those who feel isolated or insecure. Sinners offer a false community, where morality is replaced by material gain, and justice is sacrificed for convenience. Solomon, however, reminds us that these promises are illusory. The true reward is not found in selfish pursuit of wealth or momentary pleasure, but in integrity and justice. Those who give in to the seduction of sinners eventually discover that ill-gotten gains bring only pain and ruin. The houses full of plunder are, in reality, empty of true peace and joy. This warning also leads us to consider the role of choices in our lives. Every decision we make has the potential to bring us closer to or further from the path of wisdom. The company we keep, the voices we choose to listen to, shape our character and determine our destiny. Solomon urges us to choose wisely, to resist the pressure of sinners, and to keep our focus on what is just and good. This passage is particularly relevant in the modern world, where the temptations to follow wrong paths are often amplified by social media, consumer culture, and the relentless pursuit of status and wealth. In an environment where success is often measured by external and superficial standards, the voice of sinners can seem louder and more attractive than ever. Yet wisdom calls us to resist, to seek a path of integrity that may not be easy, but leads to a life of genuine peace and fulfillment. Furthermore, Solomon invites us to reflect on the nature of our own temptations and to develop the inner strength needed to resist them. This doesn't mean isolating ourselves from the world or avoiding all risks, but rather cultivating a deep discernment that allows us to recognize when an offer is deceptive and potentially destructive. As we progress through Proverbs, we'll see that this warning against the seduction of sinners is just one of many instructions on how to live a wise and morally upright life. It teaches us that true strength lies not in following the crowd, but in standing firm in the principles of justice and truth, even when that means swimming against the current. As we dive deeper into the first chapter of Proverbs, Solomon reveals to us one of the most fundamental dynamics of wisdom: the rewards and consequences it brings. He clearly warns us that those who seek and follow wisdom will reap positive rewards, while those who reject it will face a difficult fate. This duality between reward and punishment is central to the message of Proverbs and serves as a powerful motivation to choose the path of wisdom. Solomon presents wisdom not just as an abstract concept, but as an active force that directly influences the quality of our lives. For those who seek it, wisdom offers protection, prosperity, and peace. It is compared to a shield that defends us from life's pitfalls, a light that illuminates our paths and guides us away from danger. By following wisdom, we enter a virtuous cycle where good choices yield good results, which in turn encourage us to continue on the right path. On the other hand, Solomon also warns us about the severe consequences of ignoring wisdom. He describes how those who despise it and follow their own paths of foolishness will end up reaping suffering, calamity, and destruction. What begins as small choices of disobedience or selfishness can quickly escalate, leading to a downward spiral that culminates in disaster. Solomon's words are harsh but necessary. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. This message, though ancient, resonates strongly in our modern age. We live in a world where the consequences of our choices can be seen clearly and immediately. From financial and professional matters to personal relationships, the decisions we make today have the power to shape our future in profound and lasting ways. Ignoring wisdom, whether expressed in Scripture, the advice of the experienced, or our moral intuition, often leads to regrets and consequences that could have been avoided. But Solomon doesn't leave us without hope. He also emphasizes that it's never too late to change course. Wisdom is always available, ready to welcome those who wish to learn and correct their ways. True wisdom involves humility, the willingness to acknowledge our mistakes, and the courage to make necessary corrections. When we choose to follow this path, the rewards are abundant: a life of peace, stability, and a sense of purpose that transcends the ups and downs of daily existence. Moreover, Solomon shows us that the rewards of wisdom are not just material. While prosperity and security are often mentioned, there is a deeper spiritual dimension that unfolds. Wisdom connects us to the divine, aligns us with the eternal principles that govern life, and allows us to live in a way that honors both ourselves and the Creator. This is the true reward of wisdom, a life that is in harmony with the universe, filled with meaning and lasting satisfaction. As we reflect on these promises and consequences, we are called to take stock of our own lives. Are we living according to the principles of wisdom? Are we reaping the fruits of obedience or experiencing the pains of foolishness? And more importantly, are we willing to change, to seek wisdom with a sincere heart, and to allow it to guide us in all areas of our existence? This part of the chapter challenges us to look beyond superficial appearances and consider the long-term impact of our choices. Wisdom offers us a clear path to a life of prosperity and peace, but it is up to us to decide whether we will follow that path. Solomon leaves us with a choice: embrace wisdom and live, or reject it and suffer the consequences. As we continue to explore Proverbs, we will see how these promises and warnings are repeated and deepened, offering an increasingly rich and complex view of how wisdom can transform our lives in ways we may never have imagined. We now reach the climax of the first chapter of Proverbs, where wisdom makes a final, almost desperate call for us to hear and respond to its invitation. The intensity of this call reflects the urgency of its message. Wisdom cannot be ignored with impunity. It pleads with us to pay attention, to abandon our foolish ways, and to choose the path of understanding and life. Solomon personifies wisdom as a figure who cries out in the streets, raising her voice in the squares, at the crossroads, and at the city gates. She does not whisper in secret. Rather, she manifests herself in plain sight, calling out to everyone, especially the foolish and the scoffers, to change their ways. The appeal is clear. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you. This call is both a generous offer and a serious warning. Wisdom offers a spirit of discernment, a deep understanding of divine words and ways. It promises revelation and insight to those who turn to it with a humble and willing heart. However, this offer is not eternal. There is a time to listen, and a time when the consequences of choices inevitably manifest. Solomon warns that those who repeatedly ignore this call, who mock wisdom and reject its counsel, will eventually encounter calamity. When disaster strikes, they will call out, but wisdom will not hear them. This is one of the most somber and solemn passages in Proverbs, highlighting the gravity of disregarding the opportunity to learn and grow while there is still time. This section of the chapter confronts us with the reality of late repentance. How many times in our own lives have we ignored warning signs, convinced that there is still time to correct the course? Wisdom warns us that this time is not infinite. There is a point where the consequences of our choices become irreversible, and at that point, the cry for help may come too late. What can we learn from this warning? First, the importance of being proactive in seeking wisdom. We cannot wait until things go wrong to seek guidance. True wisdom involves anticipating problems, understanding the potential consequences of our actions, and making decisions based on solid principles from the beginning. Second, this passage teaches us about the importance of receptivity. Solomon speaks directly to the simple, the scoffers, and the fools, groups representing different types of resistance to wisdom. Some may be ignorant, others cynical, and others still may be stubborn. But all are invited to listen, to change direction, and to embrace the path of wisdom. This reminds us that no matter where we are on our journey, there is always an opportunity to learn, grow, and change. Finally, this section challenges us to reflect on our responses to wisdom's call. Are we actively listening? Are we allowing it to guide our decisions? Or are we stubbornly following our own ways, believing that we can deal with the consequences later? Solomon implores us to listen now, while there is still time, and to allow wisdom to shape and transform us before it's too late. This urgency, this final call, is one of the reasons why the Book of Proverbs remains so powerful and relevant today. It is not just a collection of maxims or practical advice. It is a summons to live according to the eternal principles that lead to true life. As we conclude this first chapter, we are left with a clear choice: to heed the call of wisdom or to face the consequences of ignoring it. In the following chapters, we will continue to explore how this wisdom unfolds in different aspects of life, offering both practical and spiritual guidance to help us navigate the complexities of human existence. But for now, the appeal is simple and direct. Listen to the voice of wisdom and live. As we come to the end of the first chapter of Proverbs, it's time to reflect on the deep and timeless lessons that Solomon has presented to us. This chapter is not just an introduction to wisdom, but a powerful and urgent invitation for each of us to make a decision. To live according to the principles of wisdom, or to follow the path of foolishness, whose consequences are inevitable and often devastating. The journey we began in this first chapter was an exploration of the fundamental aspects of wisdom. The fear of the Lord as the beginning of knowledge, the importance of listening to and valuing parental advice, the dangers of the seduction of sinners, and the promise of rewards for those who choose the path of righteousness. Each of these themes offers insights that can transform our lives if we apply them with seriousness and determination. Solomon has shown us that wisdom is not just a desirable quality, it is essential for living a full and satisfying life. Wisdom protects us, guides us, and helps us avoid the pitfalls that inevitably arise along our way. However, it also requires a genuine commitment from us. It's not something we acquire passively, but something we actively seek, with open hearts and minds. The urgency of wisdom's call echoes through the ages, reaching us today with the same intensity it had when it was written. In a world where we are constantly bombarded with conflicting information and opinions, the need for discernment has never been greater. The voice of wisdom, as we have seen, does not hide. It cries out in the streets, seeking to reach those who are willing to listen. But it is up to us to pay attention, discern this voice amid the chaos, and respond to it. This chapter also challenges us to look within ourselves. Where are we on our journey? Are we truly living according to the principles of wisdom, or are we allowing ourselves to be led by the pressures and seductions of the world around us? This is a question each of us must answer for ourselves, and the answer may determine not only the course of our lives, but also our legacy and impact on others. Another fundamental aspect that this chapter teaches us is the importance of acting now. Wisdom calls us not to procrastinate, not to wait until it's too late. The choices we make today shape our tomorrow, and every day we delay in seeking wisdom is a day that takes us further from the path of full life. Solomon warns us of the consequences of ignoring this call, showing that eventually the lack of wisdom will lead to situations of despair and calamity from which there is no easy return. As we reflect on this first chapter, we are called to make a renewed commitment to wisdom. This means being willing to learn, to listen, to correct our mistakes, and to follow a path of integrity, even when it is difficult or unpopular. Wisdom, as Solomon shows us, is not a shortcut to happiness. It is a long and sometimes arduous path, but one that leads to true peace, lasting contentment, and deep connection with the divine. At the end of this chapter, we are left with a clear and inescapable choice: to embrace wisdom and its promises of life, or to follow the path of foolishness, which leads to destruction. This is not a choice we make once and leave behind, but one we renew daily in our actions, thoughts, and decisions. As we prepare to explore the following chapters, where each will bring us new lessons and insights, let us carry with us the deep truths of this first chapter. May we commit to seeking wisdom with all our being, applying it in every aspect of our lives, and teaching others the priceless value of living according to the principles that Solomon so carefully articulated. The first chapter of Proverbs has left us with a map for life. Now it is up to us to follow that path with courage, dedication, and faith, knowing that true wisdom not only illuminates our path, but also leads us to the abundant life that we all, deep down, desire to achieve. As we conclude our exploration of Chapter 1 of Proverbs, it's essential to reflect on the teachings and, more importantly, consider how we can apply them practically in our daily lives. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What was the biggest insight or lesson you took away from studying this chapter? Please share your story in the comments below and help others find inspiration in your experience. Your participation will not only enrich this discussion, but might also be the key to someone who needs guidance or motivation. Moreover, don't stop here. We're just at the beginning of our journey through the secret codes of Proverbs. In the next video, we'll continue to unravel the mysteries and wisdom contained in the other 31 chapters of this extraordinary book. In the next episode, we'll dive into Chapter 2, where we'll discuss the promises of favor and success that come from trusting in the Lord and not in our own understanding. Click on the screen now to watch the next video and continue this journey of spiritual and personal transformation. Don't miss the opportunity to deepen your knowledge and apply these powerful teachings in your life. See you there.